welcome to Look Smarter Than You Are with Oracle Essbase 21c. My name is Jason Novikoff, and in this video I'm going to contrast the authentication options for Essbase 21c independent deployments. Essbase 21c can either be deployed via Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Marketplace Stack deployment or independent deployment on Linux or Windows. The OCI Marketplace Configurator creates a Linux VM with the latest version of Essbase already configured. The only authentication option for Essbase 21c deployed on an OCI stack via Marketplace is Oracle Identity and Access Management, also known as IAM, formerly known as IDCS. The Linux or Windows server for independent deployment can be physical or virtual machine, including virtual machines hosted on cloud compute platforms. The remainder of this presentation will focus on authentication options for independent deployment of Essbase 21c, specifically the options and constraints of Essbase version 21.3 and EPM version 11.2.7 that were released in Q4 of 2021. There are three authentication options for 21c independent deployment: native Essbase security, WebLogic authentication, and EPM shared services authentication. If you do not select to enable the EPM shared services identity provider during configuration of your Essbase 21c instance, you will be initially presented with the native Essbase security mode. In this native mode, the security card is enabled in the top menu, and you will have options to add, import, and export users as well as groups via the Essbase interface. While the initial Essbase administrator username and password are the same as the values you provided for the WebLogic administrator account during configuration, the password isn't being authenticated against WebLogic. The groups, users, and passwords you create here are being stored in the Essbase relational repository instead of within WebLogic. Any users or groups created in this interface become invalid and non-editable once an external authentication provider such as LDAP or MSAD is configured in WebLogic. You can delete the invalidated users and groups after external authentication is configured, but the native Essbase users are unable to log in. Oracle does not recommend using this native security mode for production environments. Once an external authentication provider is configured in WebLogic, the security card remains in the top menu, but the users and group selections on the left are removed. The Add Role button presents you a list of users and groups defined in the external authentication provider that are not already provisioned with a role for this Essbase instance. You can click on the applicable circle to define the server role for a given user or group, or click the X in the action column to delete the row. A user or group must be provisioned here before they can be granted access to an Essbase cube. It is possible to adjust WebLogic via the virtualize equal true parameter to make the native WebLogic users and groups available in Essbase, but external directory users cannot be added to the native WebLogic groups. For external directories like LDAP or Active Directory, user and group associations have to be managed within that directory. For WebLogic authentication mode, all provisioning is done either in the Essbase web user interface or automated via RestAPI. Once the user or group has been provisioned with access to the server, the second step is granting them access to one or more applications. This has to be done on an application-by-application basis. The third provisioning step is optional and is only necessary if you need to grant calculation execution access or apply a filter to a user or group to limit their read or write access to a certain slice of the queue. Filter and calculation access is assigned in the Database Inspect menu of the Essbase interface regardless of the authentication type. Once a filter or calculation script is selected, you click the Roles tab, then the plus icon to associate a user or group. If you don't see the user or group you are expecting, they will need to be first provisioned with read or update access to the application. If the EPM shared services identity provider was selected during configuration of your Essbase 21c instance, you can log into the Essbase website using the shared services native user, admin. Notice that there's no security card in the top menu because instance and application security occurs in the EPM Workspace website for this authentication mode. If your implementation requires native security groups that contain external users, or if you're upgrading from an Essbase 11124 environment, the Essbase Shared Services Authentication mode may be your preferred solution. To provision users or groups in EPM Shared Services Authentication mode, you log into the EPM Workspace website, which is independent of Essbase. The Essbase instance name of Essbase cluster followed by a number is automatically sequentially assigned during Essbase 21c configuration. As I pointed out previously, filter and calc assignment functionality isn't available for Essbase 21 instances in the EPM Workspace website. You can use LCM and EPM Shared Services to export and import provisioning. However, filter and calc assignments are not included in the LCM job. Filters and calculations can be assigned to users or groups in one of three ways: the Essbase 21c website, RestAPI, or Maxell. There are fewer roles for the WebLogic Authentication mode. The role mapping between WebLogic and Shared Services modes are found in this table. I was disappointed to learn that the Maxell commands to grant privileges to users and groups do not work, with the exception of granting calculation and filter access. This isn't new to Essbase 21c, as the same commands did not work with the OAC or Essbase 19c versions. The only supported way to programmatically provision users and groups in Essbase 21c is via RestAPI. I don't find RestAPI to be as intuitive as Maxell. This example uses curl to connect to the Essbase URL as an Essbase administrator and add the user John to the filter Jan_read in the sample basic queue.